it just I do this. I do this as more like one is like I don't have a big YouTube channel. It's more for historical records, but then also two, it actually is helpful for some founders to just send to other people so that they don't have to repeat themselves.
Okay. No, that's fantastic. So it's awesome to be live with you, Sean. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So we're
yeah,
just getting introduced. Yeah. And
yeah,
I
yeah.
also
So
tend to
my
skip my own self-introduction so that because most people know me, so I don't.
Okay, okay, great. Yeah, so I'm the founder and CEO of Tigerbeetle. I also created it, and it's a pretty interesting journey. I learned coding when I was a kid. I was standing over people's shoulders, which made me want to learn all the more. And I had an old 286, and I got basic books out the library, and that convinced me that I didn't want to study computer science because I always had fun with like real problems and figuring out how to solve them. And so I like computer science, but I thought, well, let me study something else. So I studied accounting because I like business and startups, and figured, people convinced me that that was the language of business, was double entry. So, and then I got back into coding and startups, and then eventually I did some consulting on a open source payment switch, and the idea was the task was to figure out, where are the performance bottlenecks and how can we make the system safer. So it's just a switch that routes money between banks, and they say IOU, IOU. And then every now and then they say, okay, we've done all these transactions. Now I'm actually going to give you money to make up for what we've agreed. So that's how the switch works. And it's just tracking money movements within the participants of the switch. It's kind of like a poker table, like different banks sitting around the table doing IOUs, and every now and then they get up and actually exchange the money, and then that settles the books, and then they go back to what they call clearing. So there's clearing and settlement, but it's basically just double entry, moving money between the people at the table, and then but sometimes also they have to move money to other tables, to other systems, and those systems run different technology stacks. So these are the two problems. How do you track the money in the system as it moves? And how do you track the money between systems with different stacks? So the first problem is double entry accounting. That's like it's a good, pretty good schema, for business events.
Thousands of years
And
old schema. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And then the second problem is two-phase commit protocol from distributed systems, which is, how do you move something from one system to another system, even if the network can fail and hardware can fail. And uh, so, so that's what we saw in the switch. They had both of these going on, and that's what made it tricky because they had SQL, then they had 10,000 lines of code around the SQL to make basically a double entry accounting database that could also do two-phase commit with other double entry accounting databases that could also do two-phase commit. And that this is kind of like, I don't know if this is accurate, but I'm still learning about, the space, but from what I hear, chatting to people, everybody seems to be building these ledgers, DIY from SQL. And so looking at the switch, the bottlenecks were that for every financial transaction through the switch, you have to do 18 to 20 SQL queries physically under the hood. So one business event is 20 SQL queries. One is 20. So then if your database can do, you know, 20,000 SQL queries a second, but you've got an amplification factor of 20, then yeah, that's only 1,000 transactions a second, but basically this switch was doing even less. It was about 100 a second. And then we realized, well, the debits and credits are pretty small. And we've got all this back and forth across the network just to execute double entry. What if we had a database that offered first class double entry primitives and first class two-phase commit over those double entry transactions? So basically, a database that lets you have accounts and transfers between accounts from one account to another. And then with the caveat that you can make a transfer two-phase. So you can say, let's move money from this account to this account, but wait a second, I'm going to now chat to this external system, and if they're good, then we're going to move it. But in between, while I chat to the system, please reserve the money so we can account for this in-flight liquidity, and then it's either going to move or not move. So that's where, those are the two things, and we've figured, well, everybody has learned like not to put like user images in SQL anymore. Like, let's put them in S3. That's the database to use for profile photos, and then time series data, and don't use Postgres as a queue. Use a streaming database like Red Panda. And then we figured, well, wouldn't it be nice if for financial consistency you had a database that offered double entry first class with the two-phase and a few other nice things. So that's how we created Tigerbeetle, like kind of like Ruby on Rails. We extracted it from a real problem.
Yeah.
And because I would never have thought to do the two-phase thing. We would only have done double entry. But here we could actually see a real system, see what it needed. And now you can have, like with Tigerbeetle, you can actually take like 8,000 financial transactions and in a single database query, execute all of them. Because the debits and credits are small, you can pack them all into like a 1 meg query to the database. And then Tigerbeetle's whole consensus and storage implementations, like the whole distributed database, was designed from the ground up to make batching a first-class citizen in the API. So we can take a 1 meg message, replicate it through the consensus protocol, and store it durably on disk, and then execute it all. That's much more efficient than routing every financial transaction through the consensus one by one. That's far more expensive. So that's the bigger insight in the performance of Tigerbeetle.
Which is you started at 400,000 TPS and now you're at 1 million. How important is this? Like, who's asking? Like, is this like banks? Like, who's asking for 1 million TPS?
I think it's Maverick in Top Gun is saying, like, I feel the need.
Need for speed. Yeah.
Yeah. So just to clarify, so we got to like 1.2 million with our first storage engine on like an old 2012 MacBook Air, because the goal was like, let's not use expensive hardware. Let's just use commodity stuff, because that will make Tigerbeetle easier to operate. So like something fast, but it's also small, doesn't have a lot of demands on hardware. So 1.2 million. Then now we've got a new storage engine, which does a whole lot more work. So now it actually indexes all the fields of these accounts and these transfers. So we're busy building with Jamie Brandon. He's joined the team recently. He did the SQL engine for Materialize, and he's focused sort of on our like query engine. So it's kind of like fully relational. You can query all your double entry and say, get me all transfers between these accounts where the amount was less than this and after this date, and choose your sort order and all of that. So basically, we've got a whole new LSM storage engine, and we're indexing everything so that you don't ever have to worry, did I forget an index? Because the data, like the data model for Tigerbeetle is so constrained, we can actually just index everything. And that's kind of the philosophy, that you have very consistent, predictable performance. So we didn't want to have this case, and easy operating experience. Like, we didn't want to have the case where you deploy Tigerbeetle and say, oh, I forgot to index that field, or, and then you have these expensive queries. So everything is there. So now our new storage engine is at about 100,000 transactions a second, doing all this extra work. And we're aiming to be at about, well, we'll see how we get, but we're working up to 1 million, in the next few months. So, and that'll be then on NVMe. So it's a little bit faster disk. The old numbers were on like spinning Rust, but we're not yet at production, but 1 million is our design target. And we're aiming for our first release in June, end of June.
Yeah. Cool. I'm very curious about you choosing Zig. That seems to be another up and coming sort of C replacement. But also I feel like that is too low level for me. I've never played around with Zig, so I don't really know. But I'm sure you're enjoying it, and it's paying dividends.
Yeah. How do you like TypeScript, Sean?
How do I like TypeScript?
I
mean, it's great. But there's a different level of
language. But I mean, is it something that you've used, or what are your preferred languages, or
Python? Yeah, I mean, so yeah, I didn't cover this in my intro, but I
Mm.
was the main documentation writer for the React and TypeScript communities. So
Okay,
when they teach React and TypeScript, most of the time my cheat sheet shows up.
okay,
It's got 40,000 stars or something on the repo, and yeah, I was pretty early adopter of React and TypeScript, uh,
okay.
and have gone quite deep on it. At the same time, I think that I wouldn't set up TypeScript for a lot of use cases while it still needs a build step. So right now we're in like a weird phase where um, some of the runtimes are actually adopting TypeScript as a first class citizen. Therefore, you actually don't need a build step. Therefore, the cost of TypeScript
Yes,
is actually much lower.
yeah,
Um,
which is awesome.
yeah, but in the meantime, because Node doesn't do that, um, there's actually an intermediate step about using JSDoc, which is just type annotations within comments only,
Mm.
which actually is much better. And I do that for my own sites sometimes. So like
Okay,
between untyped and fully typed, there's a middle layer which is like optionally typed in comments with that don't require any build step, and that can be a good trade-off for some things.
okay. So when I ask like, how do you like TypeScript, that kind of sounds like rhetorical, right? But I meant it sincerely because I had no clue that you had done all of that, which is pretty awesome.
Oh yeah, yeah. No,
Yeah,
I'm interested in like better languages
yeah,
because I don't think we should be stuck to 40, 50, 40 plus year old
yeah.
languages. Um,
Exactly. No, TypeScript is cool. So the reason I asked is it's kind of why we chose Zig because we realized either it was going to be C and then the project wouldn't be accessible to people because now how do you read it, let alone write
yeah,
it,
yeah,
let alone write it safely
yeah,
and let alone know that you've written it safely, you know? So, and then what we realized is Zig reads a lot like TypeScript. So that can solve a lot of the problem. Like people can at least read the code and understand it.
yeah,
And so that's what I really liked about Zig. I mean, it was one of the things, but most of all, that was the deciding factor, just that it's accessible. But most of all was, the big reasons were like the memory efficiency. It's probably, I think it's the most extreme systems programming language there is. It's the most optimal for working with the machine. Um, and it's the most modern. It's got amazing safety compared to C. So C and C++ got a bad rap for memory safety issues, and a lot of people have flocked to Rust. But I think that Zig solves those issues, not 100%, but it solves them in a way that changes the game. Like it's order of magnitude. Zig has bounds checking enabled by default. It's got um, checked arithmetic enabled by default, which Rust doesn't do by default, interestingly enough, in safe builds, but Zig does. So that all your addition and division and it's all checked. And if there's anything wrong, if you got it wrong, your program will crash safely,
yeah,
and you'll get a stack trace. And then Zig is like a simple language, so you can hold it all in your head. And the thing is that also with systems programming, like when you use IO Uring, for high performance IO, you can't copy memory like when you work with that. So if I understand correctly, with the borrow checker, it's not so easy to work with IOU-ring because now memory is being passed. You're working with shared memory with the kernel. Now, how do you do lifetimes and stuff? So you have to create copies. But the whole point of IOU-ring is that you should be able to do zero copy communication with the kernel without context switches. So because the NVMEs are getting so fast that a context switch is almost on the same order of magnitude. So you can halve throughput just by starting to do memory copies and context switches. So that's why I like them. And the other thing is, I think like the way IO used to be before IO Uring, you had to do a lot of multi-threading. You needed to have fearless concurrency. But with IO Uring these days, you can write a single threaded event loop. So you don't have to be multi-threaded. And Tigerbeetle, we don't actually use any user threads. We have one thread. So it's very simple control plane. We don't have to think about race conditions. You have to think about logical, concurrency issues, because that can even happen in a single threaded program, which the borrow checker would be great at. But still, again, you've taken a very hard problem of multi-threading and you've just like chopped it down just to a single thread. You've changed the game again. with IOU-ring. And so that's also why we thought, well, we didn't need the borrow checker as much, because the world has changed. The way you talk to the kernels through IOU-ring these days don't need to be fearlessly concurrent as much. Sometimes you do, but for us, we didn't need it. So we just have a single threaded event loop like Node. And then for our worker pool, we literally just outsource to the kernel's own thread pool, which is more efficient than user space threads. And that's all through IOU-ring. So that was also why we chose Zig, because it's just, you can do that. You have to do unsafe stuff always. And in Zig is designed for making that as safe as possible. Whereas Rust kind of says, just don't ever do it. Just don't go there. But you have to go there. And then the question is, well, when you do, how good is the experience? And I think we just preferred, like for static memory allocation that we do. So once we start up, we don't allocate memory dynamically. We start up and then we allocate the memory we need on the heap, but it's all fixed. All the limits of everything is fixed in advance. So we know that we can run every permutation of the consensus protocol through Tigerbeetle. All kinds of, everything will run, and we know exactly how much memory we need, and we can allocate that. And that's also more efficient, because now we tend to allocate less memory than if we just thought, oh, we'll just allocate when we need to. Then you don't really think about allocations. But Zig is also great for just being explicit around memory. It's quite unique as a language like that.
Yeah.
So those, Rust is fantastic, but I think for what we do, Zig is simple control flow. It's just nice, fun. So,
It's not common. So first of all, I can see you're very passionate about this, which is very awesome. And there should be more Zig advocacy. I basically only heard about it from, well, first I heard about it on a Rust podcast. I think the Rust Station podcast started picking up attention on Zig. And then Bun was a very significant project in JavaScript space, and then obviously now you guys.
Yes.
It's very
Bun
unusual.
actually uses our IO stack. Tigerbeetle's IOU-ring stuff and IO stack, a lot of that is in Bun. So,
wow.
yeah.
It's very unusual for distributed, because there's a few ways to optimize. This is kind of optimized on single node performance, but then you also working on the distributed consensus layer, which is I haven't seen this yet.
Cool, thanks.
Are being so
Are you thinking usually people go distributed and then horizontal scaling?
Yeah.
So we kind of held back there. We did single node replicated for high availability. So, because often if people run Postgres, there isn't really a strategy around how to do like backups so that you actually don't lose any data. It's like, okay, we got backups, but like we'll lose 5 minutes of financial transactions, or like if you need to do failover, it's got to be manually done, which is kind of like the consensus algorithm, but now it's 2 a.m. by a human. And then I think it's much nicer if your database just gives it to you automatically, like single binary, spin it up on like 6 machines, put 2 machines in one AZ, 2 in another, 2 in another. And then you've got 3 AZs, 2 machines each. You can use a whole AZ and your cluster's still running. So Amazon is going down, but you're still available. That's pretty cool. And then so that's kind of that was why we wanted replications for high availability. Also, you want durability, kind of data loss. But then what often happens is like with Cockroach, I think like this is just my opinion, but they do like, mega scaling and horizontal scaling and that, where your data set starts getting split across consensus groups. But then when you want to get a picture of the whole world, you have to now do 2-phase commit in the database to talk to different shards. And our philosophy is just different. And we thought, well, we think we can go faster than any kind of we can scale better if we push the per core limit. And there was that paper by Frank McSherry, Scalability, but at what cost? And basically they were saying like a lot of problems have been over horizontal. So, and then it actually turns out that you add all these horizontal shards, but throughput is just not going up. And then they were showing, well, if you do like vertical systems, you can do what 100 machines could do, and you're still competing. So that's what we liked for Tigerbeetle. We thought, well, we'll give a vertical node 1 million a second, and that should be enough. Famous last words.
That's
Yeah,
great. Yeah, I can already see the visual in my head.
yeah,
That's super interesting. I've so what I just one more follow up, then I want to open it up to just like whatever questions or topics you wanted to bring up.
yeah,
What are like the main users that people should know that are using Tiger Beetle? Like right now, I don't have a good sense of like
yeah.
what are the sort of key users that everybody should know.
Okay, like use cases, sure.
Like I feel like use cases is one thing, but like like concrete examples of actual companies or yeah.
Okay. So it's we pre-production, so production only in June. So we have some design partners, and um, one of them is an energy startup in the UK, and they're pretty interesting because they're switching energy back and forth into the grid to arbitrage energy prices. So
Nice.
they like you can work with them, and they'll hook you up. And when the energy in the grid is expensive, you can sell. And when the energy in the grid is cheap, um, you can buy, and basically hook up your EV or your solar, your gas, or all of that into the smart meter. But that means that now because they're arbitraging, they want to switch energy more and more frequently. So instead of like once a day, now half an hour, then they want to move to every minute. So if they have 1 million customers, you can see soon, like every second, they want to be switching a lot of transactions. So that's why they really like Tigerbeetle. And otherwise, we're still pretty young. So we're 6 months old as a company, as a startup. And
Amazing.
we kind of, yeah, we focused on we've been going for 2.5 years in total as open source, Apache 2. And then Coil hired me full time to work on Tigerbeetle as open source, which was pretty amazing, like life changing. And then we spun out of Coil, which is pretty amazing, and they invested. And yeah, Amplify Partners led our seed in November.
Sarah,
And
yeah, she's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah, awesome. And we really lucked out, like to meet them as well. So yeah,
I
that
mean,
was through
it's a
Jamie's
great
High Trad
idea.
Boy conference. Yeah,
Oh, you met at some conference?
yeah, we met Amplify at Jamie Brandon's High Trad Boy conference. Uh,
Oh.
yeah. Yeah, they were there. I think they were the only VC there, And they were like, yeah, we do such
Like
great
it
work.
was you mean physically because it was an online conference. Was there a physical
Yeah.
location?
Not physically, so just
Okay,
through the conference we met, and then we were in touch afterwards.
that's amazing.
Um,
Yeah, yeah.
so
That was a very
it's
special conference, it's like I wish more conferences were like that, very community, but then also just interesting, like
yeah,
not selling, here's my cloud product, come sell my stuff, or like very predictable talks. Like a lot of talks were just like very new, very unusual, a lot of data
yeah,
logging. Uh,
yeah. Yeah, I was so nervous because all the people there were like my heroes speaking, like James Cowling and Paul Kong and Frank McSherry. And I thought, okay, and it's like parallel tracks as well. So
yeah,
I
it's a
was,
little bit of
yeah,
competition. Yeah.
yeah. But I mean, I just loved it. So to be there, and like it was really special. Like, and Nikki Tonsky and
Yeah.
all the like the
Oh,
quirks
he
of
was
the
the one with the
talks.
skit, right?
He
Uh, he,
actually rubbed the database on it. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, people like that, yeah, just very special.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope to do something similar someday. But okay,
Yeah.
so I mean, so that's a fantastic background. What topics did you want to discuss?
Yeah. So I would love to know, like, how do we make open source succeed, and how does one like communicate clearly to a community, and um, what like how, because it's people, it's not developers, it's like real people, and they're all everybody's different with different interests. Like we all code, but we do other things as well. So I kind of like think one doesn't even say like developers, it's like just real people and build relationships. But then how
Yeah.
do you do that at scale, and that open source can really succeed,
So
yeah.
first thing, I love your website. Like it is so gorgeous. I don't know who did it, but like yeah, it is. I think it
It's
communicates very well.
awesome. Yeah, so it's Fabian Roiler from Coil.
Nice. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think it's a beautiful communication. The one thing I would now it's more obvious because I asked you the question. I was like, I don't see real users, and it's probably just a bit too early to tell their stories.
Yeah,
But at some point, you want to upgrade this to much higher up,
higher up.
and then tell
Yeah,
those stories as part of use cases. I
yeah.
think also I had to go into your docs here to figure out like what the deployment sort of paradigms are, and so like I know it's fast, like the fast messaging is very clear here. But
Yeah.
sometimes when you want to talk about like, hey, single, we're prioritizing the single node, and then we talk
Yeah.
about lost
It-
data, like lossless replication or whatever. Sorry,
we
go ahead.
sh we should be able to copy and paste the command right from the homepage, right?
Yeah, that would be helpful. But I wouldn't fault you for that. Like, you have to focus on some messaging at some point. You can't do everything, So I wouldn't be too concerned about that. The other thing that I think you're doing very well is that you're at most of uh anyone paying attention to new databases, you have probably reached them already. Did you do the CMU databases YouTube? You did, right?
Yes, yeah, we did. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I think that is my like probably my number one resource for like just learning about a new database and then just spending 1 hour on what I should know about them.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I think that's really awesome. Then I think there's a bit of understanding of the customer, understanding of the core user. I actually expected you to say when I asked you about use cases, some kind of financial firm exploring this, because there are a lot of people exploring, blockchain, not Bitcoin type technologies
Mm.
that could actually benefit from
Absolutely, yeah. I kind of didn't give a full answer. There are
yeah,
some payment processes designing for Tiger Beetle in Europe and India, um, and but I'm also excited to see how we can use it just for like API rate limiting or API usage tracking or billing or in-game transactions, all the like the yeah, and kind of like we kind of left banks out of the picture because that takes time.
yeah,
So we're looking at all the like the smaller fintech startups
yeah.
and
But
just like tech startups. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, games are actually a really good opportunity, particularly because most of them run their own economies, and that's actually what you want to offer, right? Like, yeah, any startup that is essentially running its own economy with its own credit system or its tokens or whatever the thing they're trading back and forth, I think is super useful. But rate limiting and accounts could be super interesting as well. So okay, I'll give you something I've been working on, which is how to thought lead.
And how not to thought lead, right?
Yes, yes. So let me. Uh, this is a blog post I've been working on for like about 2 years, and I just haven't figured out how to write it up. But basically, I've been sort of thinking about like the general design pattern of like how to get in people's heads and get yourself to spread virally among the sort of right audience.
Mm,
Um, and it's some combination of know what people want, have better facts and history than anyone else, have better vision of the future, clarify. So it's like past, present, future. Maybe I need to rearrange this. Have an
that's a great
opinion
structure.
have an opinion on everything, simplify things correctly and consistently, name things well. And so you name a double entry accounting database. I think that is useful. It is not, in my estimation, caught on enough yet, but you can get there. And then reversals, like trying to counter position yourself against some big enemy that everybody has. So those are the high level categories, and then I can dig further into some of these things. So for example, knowing what people want really means like understanding their what drives people to behavior instead of mild interest. And I think you have mild interest now, and you need to essentially try to get over the activation level into high intent behavior, at least trying you out, right? So I've been always thinking about like there's a lot of system one which is kind of very logical, and then sorry, system two which is very logical, and then system one which is like very emotional, very like,
Yes.
oh my god, need to sort of skip that. Sometimes it is engaging into emotions, and sometimes it is setting like grand challenges that are very aspirational, like, hey, everyone knows this is a known hard problem, we solved it. Stuff like that. So I mean, I feel like I don't have this well organized enough to really present to you neatly, but I can keep, I can go into most of these things. I don't know if this is like a category, a thing that you would find useful. The more standard DevRel advice I have over here, where I talk about like
Yeah,
um,
I read that post. Oops, you wrote a database, and I was
oh yeah.
feeling pretty guilty, you know.
Well, no, I mean you did it on purpose. Some people don't.
Yeah.
So it's fine. No, so the most like common DevRel stuff I always send to people first is something like this, right? Where you have the code base. A lot of DevRel is working on the meta language and trying to basically go from code to human.
Mm.
And you seem to have very human centric approaches, which is really good. And then so what I often talk about is starting from the products, building out the docs, content, and community. And it looks like you're about here-ish, and then you're starting to make some inroads in content and in community. But then also overlaying that with a map of how people um, learn you, experience you. What is having a small core and then having optional paths towards the main concerns on two dimensions that really matter to people.
Mm.
So this is basically like how do you designing the developer journey such that it is easy to start with, and then for people who are bought in, like seeing the bigger picture and then seeing like what is possible once they adopt your paradigm. I think that's super important. And then so that's why I sort of overlay this whole thing into something like this, where you always have like a matrix of concerns to think about. When you build a new feature, you also have to worry about docs, content, community for that new feature, and then you also
Yes.
have to worry about how it fits within the broader developer journey. Is kind of how I
Can
do this.
and can I just check if I understand correctly on the unhappy path? Is that is that saying that the things that maybe make
Troubleshooting,
users unhappy are billing security issues, um, or
trou-
um,
troubleshooting.
yeah.
So like I don't want you to overly focus on what is on here.
Mm.
It just matters what are the two most interesting axes that you can pick, because
Mm.
most people don't have. Most products obviously have more dimensionality to that. What we're trying to do is
Okay.
perform dimensionality reduction on behalf of our users, right? To
Okay.
to say these are the two principal components. If you do linear algebra. Um,
Yes.
for me, happy unhappy is a very very nice division,
Yeah.
because happy path meaning like I'm building features, everything works great. Unhappy paths is troubleshooting, like when things go wrong,
Mm.
error handling. When I need to observe and I don't know what's going wrong, or when I need to pay money. So so
Okay, great. Thanks. Now I
um,
get it.
yeah, I,
Yeah.
I I think I definitely think that so I call this sort of developer exception engineering, right? So uh, and I feel like you don't have to worry about this just yet. But as something as obviously as a company that handles um, production and money type use cases, you really can. A lot of developer experience is happy path, right? Like how to
Mm.
get started, how to go explore docs, explore tooling, get to production. But then they do not document any of this, and this is left to support. But
Mm.
I think if you can give people a high degree of confidence around all the unhappy path stuff, then their overall impression of you is very solid. And
Yeah.
so like my advocacy is always like most people only overly focus on happy path, and they do not spend even like half the time on happy path stuff. But actually, this is important both in product design, but then also in the rest of your stuff as well.
Yeah, Sean, this is amazing. It's fantastic.
Oh,
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah, it's really so good. We like with Tigerbeetle on the unhappy path in the ops, like operational experience. That's kind of something we focused on a lot. Like if you deploy this cluster, is it just going to run and are the latencies just going to be flat and everything's predictable so that there's no latency spikes, and no out of memory or
Yeah.
everything just works rock solid. That's why we kind of wanted to like run it on really bad hardware and just make sure it just always works and
Yeah.
won't cause a Roblox outage or fly outage,
Yeah.
Yeah, like those were real examples that we thought, because otherwise you deploy something and then if it goes bad, then it's like a 2-day outage. Like that is really bad.
Yeah. I would do more so you've put in a bunch of work there, but it's not obvious from your docs.
Yeah,
I would try to make that more obvious, like show your work.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah.
And we also did a bunch of things with regards to troubleshooting. They redesigned the yeah, so like if you have, oh man, they redesigned my docs.
Oh man, good sympathy.
I mean, this is what happens when you leave. People, other people have with a different point of view take over. But yeah, so like it's useful to have a troubleshooting handbook. Oh, actually, I can show you my React docs.
Yeah, awesome.
So this one here, and then so giving people like very like when you're in this situation, this is probably what's happening. This is what you should do. But like you can see, I spent about the same amount of effort on troubleshooting as I do happy path.
Okay.
You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like
Yeah.
when you have this, do this. When you have
Yeah.
this, do this other thing.
Yeah.
So it can be really helpful for you to just show that you've done the work. I also really like error code design. Like having an index or just like a link, like when you have errors, here's an error code. Here's a link you can click to find out more about the error, and then
Okay.
automatically file support. It can be really helpful. But I again, I wouldn't like, this is down the line, right? Like I wouldn't recommend that right away, but I am pretty passionate about unhappy path developer experience.
Yeah. No, thanks for that's I'm with you. You've opened my eyes,
What
Yeah.
yeah, I'm not sure what else. I mean, are you interested in like the thought leading stuff? I can, so I often show people this menu of things, and these are topics that I can talk about, like so essentially, like I always think things radiate out from core products. The best, so what this really means is that the best docs are the docs that you don't have to read because it's so intuitive within the product. The best blog posts, the best talks are the talks that you don't have to watch or read because it's already in the docs or it's already in the product. It's some that kind of thing. Try to always fix things at the core before you branch out towards others.
That's really good advice.
And then I have this menu of stuff that people can sort of pick off of, and I can talk about that. For you, one of the things I definitely do want to encourage is something I talked about with Montana from PostgreSML as well, which is the thing about community heat, right? You want cold community and hot community. You probably have a chat community. It looks like you have Slack. What is subscribe? What is this? Yeah. Okay. It's like a mailing list.
Yeah.
And then your blog. Yep. Okay. Yeah. So at least you're capturing the people who are sort of leaving in sort of interest. I think at some point you do want to have some kind of like changelog type updates, or like sort of regular updates.
Yes.
But that is something I do encourage people to at least capture people who are not ready for you yet, but are kind of interested in you, and give them a way to subscribe to future updates.
Okay. I've got a question also. Like I saw Slack, Discord. We started with Discord.
Yeah.
Now we're trying Slack just because of the threading and that. And it seemed that a lot of people that were trying out Tigerbeetle we're using Slack more. So if we were DMing in Discord, they wouldn't check for a few days,
Yes.
if we had to schedule a call or
Yes.
something.
Yes.
So now we've got Discord and Slack, and Slack is already more now than Discord. So we've kept both open just to do it gradually. And now we're kind of thinking as like an experiment, maybe the two can have different functions. Like Slack can be more technical and professional or more like people in their job. Discord can be more fun and water cooler and less channels. Like Slack could have more, categories and channels. Discord has just like Tigerland, and that's where people hang out, or where you have video calls or live stuff. Um, that's kind of just an idea at the moment, but I don't know. What would you advise? What or suggest?
Yeah, being realistic, it's very hard to manage two chat communities. Um, I think if you keep it extremely informal on Discord, that's fine. That actually performs the function of like a Telegram group or a WhatsApp group as well. Um, I don't know. It's a I'm indifferent about this. As long as it looks like you've made you've already found that Slack is what people use for work, and therefore they're more present, and people are more likely to have one chat out open than two chat outs open. So these are all very very standard findings in especially in open source and B2B developer tool type communities.
Yeah,
Even though Discord is more cool and easy to log in, and I hate Slack's email notifications, but it is what
yes,
people use for work. So you want to be where people work, and so I do encourage that. But if you feel like maintaining a Discord chat that's very informal and it's very very clear to everybody involved that it is informal, then fine. Like
yeah,
yeah, no issue with that. Like this is not something I would spend any amount of time thinking about. The moment you feel one way or the other, you can shut it down, you can expand it. It's not really going to move a needle either way.
okay. No, this is awesome. I've written it down like DX tips. I'd love to know when your blog post comes out on the thought leadership, because that looks fantastic.
So
Yeah,
I have a few that I like. Part of my problem is I'm doing too many things, but I have a few of that, and the other one, which is something I've been thinking about, and I actually wrote something down from a previous talk that I did with someone else, is updating Crossing the Chasm, which is essentially what you're trying to do now, right? Like that chart about like early adopters, early majority. Um, I think that we need to sort of try to specialize that in terms of developer tools, and then to see how things have changed in terms of adoption. This is another post that I'm like trying to work on, but I don't. This is much earlier. I don't have a full story yet. I definitely think, for example, if you're early stage, people are interested in implementation details, but later stage people are not. So
Mm.
those are some of the differences that Crossing the Chasm doesn't necessarily tell you, unless you really think about how developers think about that. Like people are attracted to the Zig story. People are attracted to your fancy new consensus protocol. I
Use
don't.
stamp replication.
But like, yeah, tell me all those details, because that
Yes.
makes me feel smarter about my job and helps me pitch to my company when like nothing, like, there are more established solutions out there, but you are the only people in the world doing this one particular thing, and here's why. This is cutting edge tech. Uh, sell me on that tech, right?
Mm.
Cost of adoption doesn't matter, like but like the tech is the story, and then I think people try to pivot towards selling benefits and not features too early, which is a very typical marketing advice. So
Yeah.
then also I'm trying to update Crossing the Chasm with other stuff. Like you are probably at this stage, like try to hobbyist and early adopter, and identifying like what is how do you engage, how do you nerd snipe people in terms of like solving something interesting that they would spend their free time on, and then
Yes.
how do they create toy apps um, that again is not their real time their day job, but it's something
Yeah.
interesting that they would dig their teeth in with you. And then also you probably want to focus on this because obviously you're a funded company now. Um, who is feeling real pain, and how, and what words did it use to describe those real pains, and how do you repeat it back to them?
Exactly.
Okay.
To really understand their problem, like they
Yeah.
say, oh yes, you
Yeah,
get this.
I actually wouldn't bother with the other stuff yet. Like
Yeah.
you just need to, you've already done the first part. You need to do this stages 2 and 3.
Okay. Yeah.
Uh,
On your thought leadership post,
yeah,
the past, present, future, that structure is great. And it's kind of similar, like something that we've thought is part of it is it's like the hook. How do you get someone's attention?
yeah,
And then it's how do you build trust? Once you've got their attention, how can you really build trust? Which
yeah,
is, better facts than anyone else. Know what people want is kind of emotional. It's like the hook. Um, and making human connection with people, and then but it's not enough to make a connection or to build trust. You have to have that final step, which is desire, which is when someone, this is like now the future, and people want the future, like
yes.
I don't know, that is my limited like framework so far, but this is now much broader and detailed.
Making it seem inevitable is also super useful. So, for example,
Mm.
you can say things like, in the 1990s we did X, and then 2000s we did Y. Now in 2020 we're going towards Z because of these reasons.
Mm.
Because something I did, something I think that the DuckDB guys did really well, or Mother Duck,
Yeah.
is they kind of drew that story technologically, right? And I
Yes.
literally I just came from a meeting yesterday talking about this chart, which is saying like, hey, yes, for 2000s era reasons, like this was true. Now it is no longer true because the tech has changed, right?
Mm.
So what is the underlying tech or market shifts that make old assumptions, no longer true? Um,
Yes.
so collecting those things, collecting those facts, and then presenting them in because these are all facts that anyone can gather. But
Mm.
putting them together and then making an argument from them, and then from there deriving a better version of the future, I think is a really persuasive way to do these things. Um, yeah, and so that's why sort of past leads to future, because if you arrange the past well enough, it implies the future. Um,
Yes. Yes.
and then expressing reality regarding the present, it's more about quotes, visualizations, creating formulas, any sort of frameworks for people to simplify the way that they should view the world through your eyes.
Mm.
And
This
it
is
may be
amazing. Yeah.
Thank you. So one thing I did really well, which I feel like you could possibly do, but I haven't really figured out. It's not obvious to me yet how you should do it. Naming a problem that you are the solution to, and making sure that everybody knows that problem, and that you are the leading solution to that problem. Right. So the classic example is nobody had a problem with bad breath until mouthwash came along. Um, and so I actually did a small version of this. I coined the sort of double declaration problem in GraphQL, and then I created the solution to that problem. Um, so so you can think about like what is you have a solution. It is unclear what the problem is, at least to me. Uh,
Yeah. So it's kind of two problems. Like for small startups, they have to build their own ledger database because it doesn't exist. So they want something off the shelf with convenient primitives. And then for enterprise, the MySQL ledger databases don't scale because of rollup contention. So they have to build their own ledger database also because, yeah, the systems just, they hit the wall at like 1,000 to 2,000 TPS. So like the late stage, it's like the problem is scale, and for early stage startups, the problem is convenience.
yeah. Yeah, so I think that is the rough direction that makes sense, but the naming isn't there yet, and that's why I very much focus
Mm.
on naming, because you have to essentially condense it to a name that people can repeat, and
Mm.
then build some lore around. And if you cannot name it, you can actually do a bunch of of other alternative strategies. So, for example, here's a very famous one from I think Sun did this.
Oh, I love this list. This is basically everything I know about distributed systems for Tigerbeetle. Like
Yes.
it's this, we
Do
go
you
to
know
this
there's
list, you know?
I think it's been
Yeah.
extended. I think there are two more. This is the original
Oh,
like 1970s list,
yeah.
but since then they've done like two to three more. I think I can't
Yeah.
remember. I found
We've
some extensions.
we've literally had like team syncs where we quiz each other on like what are the eight? Like, can you remember them? You know? Yeah. Okay. I didn't know there were more. Yeah.
There were more.
Mm.
Uh, yeah. I forget someone else extended them a little bit and or updated them. I think there was a
Yeah.
strange loop talk. Anyway,
Okay.
so that's yeah. I mean, there are a number of tricks to make it stickier, depending on how easy you can sort of condense your ideas. But I think it's super useful to and even to illustrate.
Mm.
And these are all just forms of making things stick in people's minds by condensing them to the smallest possible atomic unit.
Yes.
So yeah. Yeah, I'll let you know when I publish this. Obviously, this is something I've been hyping up a little bit, and I feel responsible that I need to give to others.
Oh, yeah, please let me know because I can't wait to read it. It's really fantastic, you
Don't expect too much.
know. No, it's awesome.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. No, no. Yeah. So I also want to offer you. Yeah, reversals are super interesting. So
Mm.
do you know about like so instead of like imperative, go to declarative. Instead of defensive, you go to offensive. Instead of inbound, you go to outbound. So like basically naming. If you cannot name a certain thing, like talking about the design, a way that people do things now that is wrong for XYZ reasons, and then framing yourself in direct opposition to that. And
Mm.
so I think basically having a clear enemy, like an anti-goal, um, like what you should no longer do anymore in the year 2023. I think that is also super useful. So just
Okay.
you extra tools to think about.
Yeah. Is this also like another way of saying always invert the Charlie Munger strategy? Take something and turn it around.
Um, yeah, it's the successful version of that. I think Charlie Munger uses
Okay.
it as a thought exercise, right? Like most of the time it
Yes.
doesn't work, but then when it
Yeah.
does, it works really well.
Yeah. Okay. No, those are great examples of actually how to do it in different ways. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you wanted to discuss before we stop the recording?
Oh, just to say thanks, Sean. Like you've painted a whole landscape. I kind of wanted to ask this at the beginning. Can you just, paint a picture of like community for me, like how it looks and and that's what you've done. So I'm really grateful. Yeah.
Yeah, super welcome. Yeah, I talked a little bit about community with Montana also from PostgreSML, but
Yeah.
yeah, the for me community is downstream of products and docs and content, and so I much
Yeah.
rather focus on that first because
Yeah.
that is what you have to build anyway. So I wouldn't spend too
Yeah.
much time on it, to be honest. Like it'll
No,
come.
I kind of used the wrong word. I was kind of meaning community as in the whole thing, like
Yeah,
the
yeah,
the whole, including all of that, like
yeah. I just
when
call that
people
developer
actually use
experience. Yeah, anything
yeah, DX.
the stuff that is code adjacent, that is still very dependent on
Mm.
code, but it's code adjacent. It's outside of your core database
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
But cool. Let me stop recording and then we can talk about anything that you